Welcome to Dialogue this week. In this corner, we invite guests from in and out of Korea to talk about a wide variety of issues ranging from culture and sports to the latest trends around the world. Now, reading comic books has been a pastime for many Generation X's and Y's around the world. It was perhaps the dot-com boom of the late 1990s that also started the digitalization of a variety of content that really took off in the 2000s. And comic books were no exception when it came to the decline of the paper culture. Now, this has brought about the advancement of the webtoon industry. And now that demand for mobile entertainment continues to grow, webtoons are capturing the eyes and wallets of an increasing number of users. They're also presenting a significant opportunity for Korean platform providers, as many recent TV dramas were derived from webtoon stories. In fact, in Korea, webtoons already account for the second largest share of time spent on apps after videos. And with the help of marketing and a well-established user and writer base, webtoons look likely to take root as a new culture in overseas markets as well. For Dialogue this week, we will delve deeper into the world of webtoons. And for this, we're joined by David Lee, a freelance reporter with bylines at the South China Morning Post, Vice Asia, and other foreign publications via Skype. Welcome to the show.
Hello, glad to be here this morning.
Thank you for joining us. So before we delve deeper into the discussion, David, can you give us a little bit of background on what brought about the rise of webtoons here in South Korea?
Right. Like you mentioned, webtoons began in the early 2000s when comic book stores were in decline. I've heard that a lot of these so-called, I guess, printing stations for comic books were also going out of business because it wasn't a very economic option at the time. So, and I think, like you mentioned, the rise of the internet made South Korea really rush to become a leader in digitalizing all forms of content. And today everyone wants everything kind of crammed into their smartphones. So that's a major plus for webtoons. And also, if you talk to the youth today, they don't really watch content in regular speed. Like they don't watch YouTube videos at the regular speed. They speed it up. So they really want really fast entertainment. They just kind of want the story right there at the moment. So these webtoons, an episode of a webtoon only takes about 2 or 3 minutes to read. So it really matches the trend of how the youth consumes entertainment today. And also these webtoons, I think just the sheer volume of how many webtoons are produced in a year, in a month. These webtoons usually most of these webtoons, they are updated every week compared to comic books that were traditionally monthly publications. You'd have to wait a month for a new episode to come out. But I know that for neighbor webtoons, it's I think 11:30 p.m. on Fridays that a new episode comes out. So it's that time is very popular for fans of webtoons, so who wait for new episodes to come out every time on Friday. And also, according to the Korea Creative Content Agency, in 2019 there were more than 2,700 webtoon series that came out. This you can compare this with movies and dramas. Only maybe 100 or a couple hundred movies or dramas come out every year in the country. So you can kind of compare that. Also, cost is a major factor here. According to a survey, again by the Korea Creative Content Agency, a majority of webtoon fans spend less than 5,000 won per month on webtoons. And on the other hand, from the I guess the industry side of costs and everything, the cost of producing webtoons is is way less compared to, say producing a movie or a drama series. Um, I talked to an industry insider who said that it only costs about 2 or 3 million won to produce one episode of a webtoon series, which equals to about $2,000 US dollars or around that range. And obviously, as we know, an episode of a drama these days can cost up to millions. So this kind of allows for webtoonists to be more experimental in their products, which leads to more creative and original webtoon series. And I think the major plus for me personally, I think, and for many others actually, is that it's these stories are different. K-dramas traditionally are known to be made or I guess written by a handful of famous writers. So you do kind of see these reoccurring patterns in K-dramas. Kind of these similar storylines, similar characters. And after years of kind of watching those dramas, you can kind of get tired of the same old thing. So I think webtoons provide a very, I guess, creative, original content, which also brings in diversity because, I mean, realistically, like anyone can be a writer behind one of these global webtoon series. So, um, yeah, I just think that these webtoons provide a new form of stories and, um, yeah, I guess kind of content for viewers today.
Yes, I can so relate to that. It's very cost effective and time saving as well. But according to data by the Culture Ministry and the Creative Content Agency, the South Korean webtoon industry saw its combined sales top $843 million for the first time in 2020, which is up 64% from the previous year. And 2020 was the first full year of COVID-19 pandemic. So, David, how do you think the pandemic impacted the industry?
Yeah, so obviously, there was more time for people to, look at their phones. Um, but I also think it's significant to point out that there has been a rise in the popularity of online streaming sites like Netflix, which have been known to produce global hits that are adaptations from popular webtoon series, such as Kingdom and The Uncanny Counter. So I think there's kind of I think webtoons benefit a lot from you know streaming sites like Netflix being more used during the pandemic.
But just for starters like me, can you, we see a lot of variations of what this digital comics are called webtoons. Some say web comics, manhwa or manga. Are they used interchangeably and how should they be distinguished?
Right. So it can be kind of confusing, but webtoons and webcomics are are interchangeable. They do mean the same thing. You know, comics that are digitalized, that you can see online. But webtoons are origin. They are webtoons is a term that's more South Korean in the way that webtoons originated from South Korea, and South Koreans usually don't use the term webcomics. They usually refer to webtoons. As for manhwa and manga, I think it's a difference between where they originated from. Manhwa is the Korean term for comics. I guess more of the traditional, paper comics, and manga is, the equivalent in Japan. It's Japanese comics.
And David, before getting the global spotlight with more recent titles like Sweet Home and Hellbound, there were big hits domestically like Itaewon Class that shed light on the world of webtoons. So would you say the popularity of TV shows that have been adapted from webtoons acts as a cultural bridge between webtoon readers and those who are not?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I agree with that. Just as movies that are adaptations of books kind of lead to the original books, becoming, New York bestsellers again, and getting that new hype. I think a lot of these global hits, like you mentioned, the Uncanny Counter, um, and Kingdom, they referred fans back to the webtoons, and kind of created this newfound interest in webtoons. And I'm also, one of the people who kind of notice, webtoons through this way. Um, yeah.
And what about on a global scale? Korean webtoons are now in the spotlight after almost a decade of K-pop and Korean cinema, and more recently, Korean Netflix TV shows. So, what role would you say K-webtoons can play in the spread of Korean culture elsewhere?
hmm Yeah, I think we can definitely say that South Korea has been the biggest player in globalizing, webcomics, especially in recent years. Um, and this has led to other countries coming up with their own avenues of webcomics. Even though digital comics did exist in other countries in the past, um, I think South Korea really kind of showed the potential of this market, this industry, and of webtoonists, of how many people want to become webtoonists these days, especially as becoming a digital nomad has been a trend since the pandemic, and even before the pandemic. So, um, and these popular webtoon series have produced global Netflix hits like Space Sweepers, and Kingdom. Um, so a lot of I think this promotes South Korea as an investor in creative content, not just content that's I guess redundant or um, kind of old-fashioned, but creative content, and new forms of art.
Well, Naver has recently announced that their monthly active webtoon users reached a record high of 82 million in the month of January. And the company highlighted that their overseas transactions jumped as more of their intellectual property was turned into video content. So, by this, David, what do they mean by video content of their webtoons? Are webtoons evolving from just a digitalized version of paper comics?
Yeah, this is very interesting, I think. I think we are in the middle of, as you mentioned, an evolution of webtoons. Um, and I think, I think the industry is taking hint from the success of, K-dramas, and I guess movies in South Korea by incorporating features like soundtracks, where a webtoon series will have an original soundtrack sung by K-pop artists like BTS. So as you're watching, these webtoons, you get to hear the music every time a dramatic scene appears. Um, and I think this is significant because uh, webtoon series can go on for years compared to dramas that only last a couple of months. So I think the longevity of these soundtracks are much longer. There's also a lot of more interest in innovative ways to tell stories from companies like Naver Webtoons and Kakao. Um, there's more interest in 3D, AR, um, and even back in 2017, this webtoon series called Encountered made headlines in news for featuring an avatar of the reader as the protagonist of the webtoon series. Um, so, there are a lot of possibilities that are still open, and that these companies are hoping to release soon. And just this past week, Naver Webtoon signed an MOU deal with Google Play and the Korea Creative Content Agency to invest in gaming companies, or I guess work with gaming companies to produce games based on their popular webtoon series.
Wow, it's interesting that this has also evolved to the gaming sector. Well, David, I'm afraid we will have to wrap up at this point. Thank you so much for making time for us. It was a very interesting discussion. Look forward to speaking to you again soon.
You too. Thank you for having me.